guys, we're going to go ahead and get started. We'll see if this actually works or not. So we are going to go over a few things before we get started. One of those things is a little bit about just some what I like to call housekeeping stuff. So a few things that you guys need to be aware of, a few things that you guys need to do. And once we get through those, once we get through those, then we'll go over any questions, and then we're actually going to check out your outlines. So I do want to talk a little bit about your outlines, and we're going to go over them piece by piece. And we want to make sure that you guys have everything set up correctly. Normally this would have been something that we would have done on Monday of last week to make sure that you guys understand the idea and concept of the outlines in order to make sure that you guys have everything set up. However, because this class meets beforehand and because it's essentially this is winter in Indiana. So for those of you from the southern part, sorry. It kind of sucks like this. So this morning I was up at 5. I was out at 5 this morning and slipping around and sliding around in my vehicle as well as just in my shoes. So it's kind of dangerous, and I would prefer that you guys are safe. So that's why I didn't have us meet last week. So we normally would have done that. In addition, your English 111 class is huge. It's not really supposed to be that big. Usually they're about this size. So it's a lot of people that we have to get through, which meant on Wednesday that I only got a really small bit of time with you guys, and I would have liked to have more. So keeping those things in mind, when we miss a class or when something goes on, you have to make sure that you get into Blackboard and you mark your attendance. Wednesday may or may not be one of those days. Originally, I had planned for us to meet on Wednesday, not 111, but for our group to meet on Wednesday. Unfortunately, our friend passed away, so I'm going to do my best to help his wife. It was my to-be's best friend. So we have a lot to deal with, and we're doing our best, but I may have to help her on Wednesday. So I have a conference I have to get to, and I'm going to have to do everything I can up to that point. We also...
So you're saying class canceled?
I'm not saying it's canceled. I'm saying pay attention to your email because I may or may not be able to be here.
Okay.
I do have planned that we are going to meet for 075, but I may not be able to make it. We have a funeral tomorrow anyway, and then we have to plan his funeral, and everybody's kind of a mess, so I have to be the smart one and the logical one. Jen?
I did get signed up for that stay house on
Good.
Wednesday.
Good.
So do I need to do anything for that?
No.
Okay.
No.
Well, for me, if you're not here in this board, that's the only way I learn with you.
Yeah, I'm not going to have a sub for you guys. It's kind of last minute anyway, and the stuff that I do with you guys is more specific and geared towards your individual needs and understanding. So I won't have a sub, but I may just have you do an attendance mark. Like I said, it just depends. We're all kind of a mess right now at home. So, and his sister-in-law for 20 years, she's been his sister-in-law for 20 years, and her dad died too. So he died last week, and then Jason died. And that one's pretty hard. He was our best friend, so that one's pretty hard. So whenever we miss a class, I just want to let you guys know what you need to do, but several of you didn't get to this, so I want to make sure that you guys understand. You do need to go into Blackboard when we miss a class, and you will need to mark your attendance. So for those of you who haven't already done this, you have to do this for both classes as well. So you go to class sessions, and you guys see where it says mark reviewed for attendance. Now several of you have already done this, but I do have a list of people who haven't. There's a button here that says mark reviewed. All you have to do is click on that. Now when it says reviewed, that means you have attendance done for that class session. I don't really care when you do this, but until you guys do this, I have to mark you absent. So just make sure that you do it. Get it done as soon as you can, if you haven't already. So for last Monday's class, you should have done that for 075, and you should have done that for 111. So make sure that you guys get in there and that you guys look at that.
How you go to 111? I mean, I did, I guess 075.
Back to.
Yeah, you did 075, but you didn't do 111.
Does that like reset itself?
It does. If you hit it, every time you hit it, it does the opposite. So if you hit,
Like every day, I mark every view like every day. It's like that.
yeah, you just do it once, and then it'll say reviewed, and then you should be good.
Yeah, a lot.
Yeah, I have you down for both classes, that you need to do it for both classes. I have you down too, so you need to do it.
Well, I did it for the session 4 that you put on there, but do I need to do it for the session 5 too?
No? Did you do it for 075 or 111?
I did it for both.
Okay. It may have reset, so go back in there and check it again.
Yeah, it's
Okay. As long as it didn't reset too many times, because I don't have it for you.
Ms. Boober, you
Yes.
saying I didn't, review,
111
class?
Right.
It's not, that's all I'm getting right here. There is no contact to display.
Are you in class sessions?
That's what mine did too.
Oh, go to week 4.
All
Mhm.
right.
And just click there.
Oh,
Yeah. So sometimes it's going to be within a folder. One example of this, in English 111, I did have the thesis and outline stuff. And I wanted to make sure that you guys had actually reviewed it. So I had a mark reviewed on that, as well as on the folder itself. So sometimes it's going to be on the folder. Most of the time it's just on the folder. So make sure you guys get in there and get those attendance markers taken care of.
I'm not understanding.
What's that?
I'm lost. Field is totally different.
So he's in week 4, session 1.
Yours actually came up with something. Both ours didn't either.
Right.
Oh. She's on 075.
Oh, yeah. You're in 111, so you should be able to click on 4. And click in session
Oh, okay.
1. Okay.
I'll see.
You're welcome. Make sure you mark review. What's that?
Keep saying interim after every month.
Might want to go ahead and move to another one, just for the day. Okay, any questions over this? This is just a way for both of us to have attendance. We are not, as faculty, we're not allowed to cancel classes, so we just put them online. That's kind of our way of getting around canceling classes. We try to give you guys enough information, and I apologize tenfold. This semester, I don't usually miss this much in a semester, but the conference next week, the conference in 2 weeks, the conference after that, my own life, I haven't seen my kids in so long. So, Mom, hi, I'll see you later. They are just, I'm seeing them in passing. So, kind of sucks, and I apologize for that. That's also a reason that we try to keep these classes much smaller. We should actually have about half of what your class is with full attendance. So we try to keep them pretty small so we can do more individualized work. The other thing is that when we don't meet as a whole class, if you guys want to meet or if you guys want to work together on things, then I heavily encourage you guys to do that. It's always a good idea to kind of put your brains together and work through things and work through ideas. All right, do you guys have any other questions so far? Now, what we're going to do today, I am going to answer any questions that you guys have over the information, but we're going to go through and check your outlines. In checking the outlines, we're going to make sure that you have everything set up properly. So I will have you guys open those up so we can look at those and we can look at the format of those pieces. As we're going through and checking, there are going to be certain things that I'm asking you to look for within your outline. As I'm looking at those things, I want you to be fixing those. So it does mean that you're going to have to work in 2 different ways. So you're going to have to watch and listen but you're also going to have to be doing stuff as well. Once we finish with that, we are going to go ahead and go through and set up the APA format in here. Now, when we get into 111, we are going to upload the assignment. I'm going to show you guys how to do that with the thesis and outline, and then I'm going to show you the difference between the thesis and outline and the safe assign assignment. So we'll look at both of those pieces. That will go fairly quickly, so I want you guys to be completely prepared for that. We are going to talk about going from outlines to drafts in English 111. So we'll talk about this, we'll practice with this. I'm going to show you a few pieces and how you can actually use that information. We're going to talk about developing ideas with details and do a reference and citation overview. Now, because we're doing a quick overview in 111, I do have those terms written down for you in this class. And on the back side, I have a helpful guide. It's the CRE. So it's a helpful way for you guys to remember how to set up your paragraphs. Now, this is paragraphs across the board, and we are going to talk about it specifically for this essay, for this paper. We're going to go through it fairly quickly in 111, so we're going to touch on it before we get to the 111 section. Okay? All right, any questions, general questions so far? Is it locked? Thank you. Hello. All right, any questions in general so far? All right, we are going to go through and start looking at the pieces and the components of the outline. So you will need your outline open because we are going to go through and we're going to check certain parts of the outline. So before we get to that, I want to show you guys a couple of things about your format. And I'm going to open up a student's piece so I can show you an example. I think this is the actual essay, so it may not work. No. Okay, let's say that you have a paper open. I'm just going to open up a paper. Whenever you have your paper open, you need to make sure you're checking the font and the spacing. So the easiest ways to do this, you have your paper again, you have it open, is press Control A on your keyboard. So press Control A on your keyboard. You have to press Control and A at the same time to highlight everything. And this is where you can check your format and your spacing. So it should be Times New Roman. So go up here to font, make sure it's Times New Roman. Now, the problem is many of you have your cursor somewhere in the text. You don't have everything highlighted. So only where the cursor is going to change and everything else is not going to. Okay, do you have your thesis and outline open? Okay. So just opening it up. But let's go over this part and then we'll show you some of those. Did you bring it safe on this thing? Okay, how many of you are missing your outline?
I don't know nothing about it.
That's what we talked about during our meeting with the Roman numerals.
Oh, well, I saw that too, you emailed me.
Okay, so go to your email and open it.
Campus Connect. Get a second. Yeah.
You had sent us an email for this? Is that what you said?
No, she sent hers to me in her email. Did you do the outline?
I don't put it up.
Okay, did you send right it? No, okay. Do you have a document? Okay, it's not a document. And then just type it in, call for font.
That's the summary. That's what we did last week.
Yep, right there.
We're supposed to take.
Make it Times New Roman
turn it
12.
into an hour. Okay.
Oh, this right?
We're supposed to turn that to an hour.
That's not right.
We're supposed to turn that to an hour.
I remember you explained it to me, but it kind of put it in.
Outline.
I'll get the paper set up. Then it's more than that, just make it a lot more.
All the comments talking about all the comments.
Okay,
Think you have.
She thought that was the outline.
No, I was at the learning center, she told me, this what you told me to do, what? This what I did? This what I did.
yeah. So this was, you took these ideas and put them into an
Yes,
outline.
ma'am.
Okay, you're supposed to take them and put them into an outline, so that's fine. What we'll do is we'll just type it out. So open up a new document. Go to File. Put it in. Blank document.
Right.
Okay, now make sure you set your font spacing for your font for right now. So right now, if you don't have it, go ahead and set your font to Times New Roman 12-point font. If you do have it, make sure that your entire document is set at Times New Roman 12-point font. Now, the next button is one that I need you guys to pay really close attention to, because it's not a pet peeve that I usually list, but it is kind of annoying for my eyes. So it's really difficult to get to if you don't already know where it is. So over here where it says on the home tab, these are tabs, on the home tab where it says paragraph, you can use the shortcuts, but if you use this paragraph settings button, so I want you all to click on paragraph settings. There's a little arrow out.
Yeah.
So it's right here. Click on that and another box should come up. Does everybody have the box open? You remember this spacing before and after needs to be 0 in both places, and your line spacing needs to be double. Do you have the paragraph setting open? Yeah. Okay. So make sure it's 0, 0, double, and then click don't add space between paragraphs of the same style. Please make sure that you have that taken care of. Line spacing, and then your line spacing is fine. Okay, anybody stuck on this part? Okay, it is easiest if you set this up from the beginning, but if you don't set this up from the beginning, make sure that you Control A to select everything in order to have this setting for everything. I hate to be so particular, but if you think about this, if you start being very specific and very precise now, then it's going to help you later on. It's going to help you keep some consistencies together. Times New Roman 12-point font is kind of a standard font that almost any instructor is going to use. It's important that you do pay attention to these little intricacies, these little details, these little fine details. My eyes can see when even a single letter is off. My eyes can see when even a single letter is italicized or bolded or a different format or a different spacing. It's difficult for me to look past those mistakes. Those are things that visually my eyes will go, ooh, there's a big mistake. It's kind of like if you have a bunch of hamburgers and they're all the exact same form and they look exactly the same, but you have one hamburger that's way too big for the bun and it doesn't fit in with the rest. So my eye sees a little mistake as a big hamburger. Of course I like food, so I'm going to make these references again. But it's kind of the way I see it. So you need to make sure everything is lined up precisely. Okay, the font, the formatting, the spacing, that's something you want to always be aware of. So every time you open a new document, if you're using these computers, you need to change it to Times New Roman, 12-point font, 0, 0, double, and don't on the spacing. I can go through and do that in, well, what was that, like 4 seconds or something? I do that very easily and very fluidly. You will get to that point if you keep practicing with it. So just keep practicing. And this is something that I told some of you. You need to get a computer and you need to practice. A lot of you are just going to have to get in there. You're going to have to get in there and practice with things. Open up a document that you have saved somewhere and then just play around with the document. See what things do. That's how I learned Microsoft Office. I don't know if I told you guys this, but I took that class here back in the 90s. It was a long time ago, when it first came out. So I took that class. My instructor was the program chair of something. So he was never here. So I just was playing around. That's how I learned to figure things out. If you have a document that you can play around with, look what happens when I use these different styles.
So it won't delete us or anything? None of...
As long as you don't save something, and this is why I want you guys to open up a document. One thing that those of you who are very uncomfortable with computers, one thing that you can do is open up a document that I have, a Word document that I have in Blackboard. Open that up and then play around with it. If you save that, it's going to save it to your computer, wherever you're at, but it's not going to change anything that exists on Blackboard. So it's not like you guys can mess something up. Some of you, if you have something that you've saved, if you play around with it, you may accidentally save it and overwrite everything that you've done. It's safer to open up a document that I have on Blackboard and then play around with it. But again, the styles over here, and this is how I learn. I learned by going into design and playing around with things. Hey, I want to make things different colors. I want to change fonts. I want to do things. So going in and playing around with these are called tabs at the very top. And these are the menu buttons. Most of these you have a setup button. It's kind of an arrow facing outward. Again, play around with it. There's some stuff that you can do with inserting pictures. This is how I discovered SmartArt. It's like, what's this? What's this button? What does this do? And I just started playing around with things. So play around with things, get more comfortable with it. That's going to help you guys quite a bit. And again, you guys don't have a 111 class on Wednesday, so you can have some time. You can get in there and play around. Remember last week when we talked about getting an agenda book of some kind a few weeks ago? That's going to help you guys stay focused on what it is that you need to do. But you guys are also going to have to probably lock in some times. So if you happen to be here for these two classes on Mondays and Wednesdays, and then you have another class at 12:30, why would you go home during that block of time? Why don't you just stay here? Bring your lunch in, plan ahead, bring your lunch in, do whatever you need to. Stay here for that hour and a half and do some work. Get some things done. When we don't have class, that's a great opportunity for you to go to the LRC, go to the computer lab at the front, do something here on campus, because the more that you remove yourself from it, I understand. I love napping during my breaks. That was my thing. I wanted to take a quick nap, and we had couches. I was sharing with Terry the other day. We actually had couches on the second floor at IUK. That was my nap spot. People knew I was getting really crappy with them if they were sleeping or they were sitting on my nap spot. So I did. I took quick naps all the time because I was sleep deprived, because I was doing my work at home after my kids had gone to bed. So you do what you have to do, but I want you guys to get in here and I want you guys to play around with things. So knowing your Times New Roman 12-point font, knowing your spacing is extremely important. Now, some of you have your Roman numerals set up the right way. There are shortcuts up here. I want to discourage you guys from using the shortcuts first. Instead, learn the long way, the hard way, and then if you can understand the shortcuts a bit better, then that's going to help you. The shortcuts are wrong. So remember, the first layer is actually going to be the capital Roman numeral. So if you just hit Shift I, period, and then you hit your space bar, it indents it automatically. So it says, oh, you're getting ready to do an outline, right? And then you can let it know, yeah, that's what I'm doing. So the first paragraph is what? It's going to be your introduction. Now when I hit enter, after I've typed the word introduction, it says, okay, we're ready for the next layer. But the problem is, we need some stuff under that introduction. So the easiest way to do this is to hit the tab button. Now, is this correct? Is this what you're supposed to have in the next layer of your outline?
Yes.
It's a letter, but is it lowercase or capital letter?
It's supposed to be capital.
It's capital letters. So watch what happens when I select that A. You see how it has the shading out and the shading down? That says, hey, for all the outline format, what do you want to change this to? So this is where the buttons at the top, there's like a numbering format. You can also right click to do this and set your numbering value. I like this button better because it gives me pictures. So I need this one. Another thing I want you guys to be aware of, please do not use the parentheses bracket. Try to avoid using those until you get way far down in your outline.
Which one did you click on?
The middle one,
Okay.
the numbering, the arrow next to it. You guys also need to be making sure that you're not hitting the actual numbers here, or you're not hitting the actual icon. You're hitting the arrow that goes next to it. If you hit the actual letter or the icon, it's going to change it automatically. But if you hit the arrow next to it, it's called a chevron. If you hit that chevron, that arrow that goes down next to it, then it's going to give you all the options. So we want this capital letter. We want that option. Now, what are some things that go in your introduction? What do you need to do first?
Summary.
You do need to explain that you're going to summarize something.
Your keywords?
When we start the idea, when we start the essay, what do we want to start with?
The story, the headline.
So are you going to start with Irma Sonnenberg-Minkel did this? Do your readers all know who Irma Sonnenberg-Minkel is?
Oh, we're not sure about that.
We're not sure. Brian?
What should we start with?
What should we start with?
The title.
Okay, we are going to have the title.
Wouldn't we see about,
Name.
We're going to have that part.
give a brief summary about who she is?
Okay. You put what?
I'm gonna tell you what I did.
Yeah.
I put her name and the author, blah, 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 and tells her the story of hardship, loss, and choice, previously published, and things like that.
Okay. So let me put this into some terms for you guys. So let's say you get done watching a movie. Walking Dead came back on last night. I won't do any
Are you
spoilers.
serious?
Yes, it did. It was a good one.
Oh,
I won't give you any spoilers, but if I came to you guys and I said, you know, those zombies, and then this happened to Tyrese, and this happened to Rick, and this happened to Daryl. If I start talking about these things, you guys are going, what the hell are you talking about, lady? So I need to give you some background information, and that's what you need first. First, you need some background on what?
The who she is?
You probably need a little bit of background on who she is. What else?
What happened?
In
The book, in outside, like that.
Okay, if we give information on what happened in the piece, that's part of our summary. So we can save what happened in the piece for our summary. But can we talk about the Holocaust in our summary?
Yes. No.
No.
We can only say what she has said. So maybe we need to provide our background about the Holocaust. Maybe we need to explain to our readers what the Holocaust is. So again, does everybody have the exact same knowledge of the Holocaust? No. So we can bring in just a general description of the Holocaust so our readers kind of all have that same foundational knowledge, that same understanding. In another essay, another type of essay, you're going to provide some background onto your topic. You're going to maybe provide some terminology so everybody has the same foundational knowledge. That's what an introduction is going to do, and you're going to see that slide here in just a bit. An introduction is going to give everybody at least the same basic understanding of the information. So whether that's the author, whether that's the piece, whether that's the Holocaust, because we can't add anything into the summary about the Holocaust. What else can we not add into the summary, but it's an important detail? Who else's story?
Our point of view.
That's going to be in our response section. Who else does she talk about? Anne Frank. But we can't add any information into our summary about Anne Frank, so we want to make sure our readers all have the same foundational knowledge about who Anne Frank is or was. I had a lot of students who came from California when I was teaching in Logansport, and they had no idea who Anne Frank was. That's not part of the California state curriculum. It's part of Indiana's curriculum, so many of us know who she is. We do talk about the Holocaust here. They don't talk about it very much in California for many different reasons. So we need some background information. So if I press enter and then I hit tab, now I'm going to give certain pieces of background information. Now is this little Roman numeral, is that correct? Is that what I'm supposed to have?
That looks like an I.
It's supposed to be capital, right?
It's supposed to be a 1.
It's supposed to be the number 1, that what we call the Arabic numeral. Brian? Yeah, because if yours is already set up and it's not following these formats, we're going to have to do something slightly different. So if you're set up,
Yeah, she knew about the most part of the thesis as I did. We stayed up to about 11 o'clock last night trying to figure it out. On top of getting all this stuff put together and stuff, so it's fun.
do this type of thing.
All of us. You know how to do it.
So everyone's out.
She doesn't help. I have class on Saturday. It doesn't help that I'm here all day Saturday. I have 2 5
And then decide where that goes. You're going to have to do all of those.
I'm here from 8 o'clock to 4:30, 5 o'clock Saturday.
That's what you like doing.
I'm getting ready to go on out to
So these really need to be still
No.
If that's okay. This is going to be your summary. Yeah, then that's fine. So just
I like
summary.
pharmacy.
The dash.
Chicken.
I wasn't working with one of those little pretty boys wearing one of those t-shirts. Those are golf carts and golf carts. My stepson,
Until my son was in summer, it really gets. But I got the right idea.
Yes. For the most part. So in the background, we may provide some information about Irma Sonnenberg-Menkel. We may provide some information about the Holocaust. We may provide some information about Anne Frank. You have to determine if you talk about the Holocaust a lot in your response. So if you really reacted, like Terry was talking a few weeks ago about how he understands the Holocaust, he researched it a lot, he knows about it. So that's something that makes a big difference to him. So he's probably going to provide some background information on the Holocaust. So he would want to include that. I had a student a few years ago who started journaling because of Anne Frank's story. So for her, Anne Frank meant a lot. And in her response, she talks a lot about Anne Frank and her connections to Anne Frank. But the story, the information in the summary has to be just from the story. So you have to provide sometimes a background bit of information on other topics. So understanding that you may have to provide some information about the Holocaust, you may have to provide some information about Anne Frank, and if you wanted to, you could add some information in about Irma Sonnenberg-Menkel. But make sure that you're not adding in researched information. Irma Sonnenberg-Menkel's gone. She's passed on. This party was in 1997, so she was 100 years old. So yes, she's been gone for a little while. You don't want to do any additional research, because what happens if you do additional research? What do you have to do? You're going to have to give credit to that source. So you're going to have to cite that information. So don't go outside and research anything that you don't already know.
So, like, in our summary, it can't be nothing that didn't come from this story.
Correct. And some of you need to go through and look at your summaries, because even if you have a word that is not included in the summary or in her piece, even if you just take an impression, if you said it was a really sad time, that's your impression. So you have to take words like that out of your summary. Get those out of your summary.
I mean, see, well, on my summary, I didn't do that. I just took stuff from the story. That's why in the introduction, I didn't do anything.
But be careful with even those small words like the harsh conditions.
So that wouldn't be no good.
Harsh.
You can talk about the conditions, but you can't talk about the harsh conditions unless she says that. Does she say harsh conditions? I
Well,
don't
she doesn't say harsh, but she puts that
But
in
you
another
said
word.
something like it.
But
If
then
she
didn't
says,
say no-
as long as it's a synonym for the word, but if it's your impression of the conditions, then you can't include that.
Whoa.
So basically,
This is where it's going to get really difficult for most of you.
so basically you saying we can't pretty much come up.
Yeah.
There's two things that are one, so I didn't know this. Alright?
I'm still trying
So it's specific got to be from the story.
Yes.
You can't put our own.
Not at all. Not in the summary. So if you can't point to it in the story, and I had my Tuesday class, they love to argue a lot. And they're two ex-military guys, so they were like, "Grr, we disagree with all of this." Like they were having at it. And one of them, he said, no, it does say this in the story. And he pulled his story out, and he was looking for it and looking for it and looking for it and looking for it and looking for it. And he got really upset because it wasn't in there. It was not there. So as long as you can point to it in the story and say, this is the word that I have now given a synonym for, that's going to work.
Okay, I got another, I'm kind of confused. So
Mhm.
I noticed you're saying it's directly got to be from the store.
Yes.
Okay, but you're saying we can't use our own words to put in the store.
You can't use your impression of it.
Right. So what if somebody cite the store? That's
You're
not
going
correct
to.
too, right?
You're going to. You're going to cite the story throughout your summary, and that's something we're going to get to here in a minute. So let's hold off on the summary. Let's get to this thesis, because the thesis is 10 points out of this assignment. So I would give Holocaust, Anne Frank. Now, when I press enter, and what if I want to go back to this area, and I want to have a layer here? Any idea what I do?
You said what?
If I want to have a B instead of a 3, what do I do?
You go back and take the 3 out, and then
When you just pushed in.
push.
I already pressed enter once.
Tab.
Okay. If I hit tab, it's going to go in.
Control or
If I hit backspace, it's going to make it go away.
I mean, that's what I did. If you're putting another Roman numeral on
If I'm just going to a B. Why can't I just leave the A there by itself? Remember the rules of the outline? You can't have an A without a B. You can't have a 1 without a 2. So I have to have a B here. And this is where Microsoft Office gets a little tricky, because I actually have to use this shortcut button up here that will decrease my indent. Watch what it does. Now I have my B. Now some of you may have done this instead. That works sometimes. It's not always going to work. So just be really cautious with that.
So on our thesis, we don't have to speak. I mean, of course, we're gonna put stuff from the story in there, but we don't have to use every word exactly from the story. I mean, not every word, but exact words from the story on our thesis. Like,
In your thesis, there are certain things that you have to include. What are those things that you have to include?
you have to include her,
Irma Sonnenberg-Menkel.
the Holocaust,
Hold on. And what did I tell you to add after her name? 1997 in parentheses. What else do we have to include? Okay, so we have to include I saw Anne Frank die, in quotation marks. It came from Newsweek. Many of you are not capitalizing Newsweek, but you have to.
do we need to italicize it?
Yes.
Can that be toward the end of the paper with like the references?
No.
Has to be the top?
Yep.
I'm sorry.
Are you on your thesis?
Yeah, but I did not do it like that.
Okay, that's fine. I'm going to show you guys
I didn't either.
a couple of ways to do this. So you need to have some essential information. You need to have that it was a Newsweek article. The title of the piece is I Saw Anne Frank Dies by Irma Sonnenberg-Menkel. And what did I tell you guys you needed to have as well?
The
as far
Holocaust.
as what?
In the thesis.
Don't you have to have main points of the piece?
You don't have to have main points of her piece, but you have to have main points of your piece. And where are the main points of your piece coming from? The response. So your response is those 2 or 3 things that you really responded to need to be part of this. So let's say that you said it was really sad and it was really frustrating. And this is why formatting is a nightmare. It really is. And this is why I wanted to go over it with you guys in here, because it's difficult. So let's look at the thesis and let's look at how I put it all together. So I do this. I make a list for myself. That's all I do. And then I can use that list to go backwards and say, okay, in Irma Sonnenberg
And we still gotta have them on 1, 2, 3, 4, the points on that too?
No, but I'm going to show you what I'm going to do here. Okay, I made a list for myself of all of the stuff that I have to include, and then I put those into a sentence. So now I can double check all of these. I always want to double check. I have her name, so I can get rid of that. I have I saw Anne Frank die, so I can get rid of that. I have Newsweek article, I can get rid of that. I have sad, I can get rid of that. And I have frustrating, I can get rid of that. So I make a list of the things that you want to have, that you need to have in your thesis, and then list them, and then put them together into a sentence. That's the quickest and easiest way to do this. Some of you may have created a sentence, and it may have worked this time. As you go through and create bigger essays and more essays, it's going to become more difficult to do that. So make yourself a list, and even if you don't get to it, and this is what a lot of students will do, a lot of students will create their thesis, because it's in the introduction, it's at the beginning, they'll create it, and then they make their paper fit that thesis. That's the opposite of what you should be doing. You should write your paper and then decide, what did I just say in this paper? Or you should write your outline and say, what did I decide in this paper? And kind of go backwards, which is, again, why I like to make a list for myself. So I include everything. I take this essential information, I take those 2 responses, which are my other 2 paragraphs, and then I put them together in one clear, concise sentence. I can adjust the wording on this very easily. I can move things around easily. But I at least have all the basics that I need. Now, before I leave a paragraph, what do I need to have? Before I leave one paragraph and go into the next,
You gotta have a conclusion.
I have a transition. So it's the conclusion for the introduction, but it's called a transition. Good.
3 of them.
So I have 3 basic parts to my introduction. I introduce the topic, the background information, I have my thesis, and then I have my transition. And that's what I have here in this information. So it has the minimal background, thesis statement, and then my transition before I'm ready to move on to my next paragraph. Brian? Okay, I want you guys to try to create your next paragraph, the summary paragraph. Notice how things are indented. This is another big note for you guys. So notice that everything that goes underneath this background is indented. That shows that it's kind of like the child of that piece. So all of this stuff is indented, so you see it's the child of this. This is indented underneath this, so this is the child of this. Some of you, I'm noticing, all of your pieces are lined up, or you have some pieces that are out further. The parent, what we call the parent, is supposed to be out furthest. The child is supposed to be indented. So work on that. I'm gonna come around and I'll check your pieces and see what questions that you have.
Okay, there. Remember that I that you did? Tap that, just enter. Now you're gonna hit tab. And then you're gonna type the background, yeah. So just worry about typing the stuff first and then we'll fix the format. Okay. So, capital letter I. Period. And when you hit the space bar, it says, okay, we're ready to do this. So type that up. And then hit enter. Now, if you want to go in a layer, so hit tab. And that's where you're going to type the word background. It does, but I'll show you how to fix that. Okay, so click on the A itself. Put your mouse on the A. There you go. Get your head right here to the arrow next to it. That's fine. Okay, the arrow next to it, good. Now capital A. There you go. Go to the end of background, hit enter, and then you want to have those couple of details next to it, so hit tab. And then type those things, and then do the same thing where you click on this. Yep, okay. That's this one back. Down here, so highlight from Nazi Wood. And you're going to send this. There you go. Right. So just make sure you have the layers done, and it's probably gonna save, and it'll go down that screen. So just make sure you get those. The content is what I want. So you're setting the response. And that's, so you don't, you're just not extra information. So hit enter, and then we're going to decrease the indent.
Okay guys, we're running out of time, but I want you guys to make sure that you get in there and you practice with these ideas, practice with these concepts. The introduction needs to include a minimal background, the thesis statement, and the transition. The summary, it needs to have the main idea of Irma Sonnenberg-Menkel's piece, and it needs to have some of the key points. It's as many as it takes. Many of you did paragraph by paragraph, so that's fine. Just make sure you're including those key points, those key ideas. And then you transition out. The important thing is to make sure that you're not adding in any information that doesn't exist in the story in your introduction, or I'm sorry, in your summary. So even if you think that Anne Frank dying is really sad, you can't include that in your summary. So make sure you eliminate that. Your responses. Now this is where we're going to get into some more complicated stuff. With your responses, you want to use what we call the CRE. So with the CRE, and I have an explanation of it here, with the CRE, you are giving your claim. Your claim, your initial claim, is going to be your topic sentence for your response. So if your claim, this is on the back side here, if your claim is that Menkel's story is really sad, that's your observation. That's your idea. You need to provide evidence as to why it's so sad. The evidence is going to come from the story. But here's where it gets a little bit more complicated. If you think that Anne Frank dying in Irma Sonnenberg-Menkel's arms is really sad, you need to explain to me why that's sad. You can't just say this is a sad story. Anne Frank died in Irma Sonnenberg-Menkel's arms. This happened, this happened, this happened. You can't just give me a list of all these things that happened. You have to give me your reasoning behind why you think that connects. So why do you think Anne Frank dying in her arms is sad?
Because she knew her.
Okay.
She talked to her all the time, so she was familiar with the woman.
Good. She had built a relationship with her. Anything else?
She was a child, and she was a mother away from her children. So
Good.
you could assume that she took Anne Frank as part of family, almost like a daughter.
Good. Anne Frank was kind of a surrogate daughter for her, and she was kind of a surrogate mother for her. So it was like she was losing her children all over again. Good. Anything else? So those reasons are what connect that piece of evidence, that idea, to why it's so sad. Now, what if you said that the conditions were really sad?
Wouldn't it be the same? Because we could give detail on how the condition was sad, but it wouldn't be necessarily called sad, would it?
That's exactly right. So you want to explain what about the conditions are sad. So think about, you're going to give evidence of the gruel. So they had very little to eat, including gruel and cereal, which is kind of like a cereal. They had coffee. They had,
One roll of bread.
yeah.
They couldn't shower.
Yeah.
So bring in those pieces of evidence, but then again, you have to connect it. You have to explain. So they are splitting barely enough food for one person, but they're splitting it between 500 women and girls. So you need to explain that. That's your reasoning. That's why you think that it's sad. That's why you think they're horrible conditions. Now, what if you thought the story was very frustrating? Is there any evidence from the story that's frustrating?
Her losing her family would be frustrating.
Good. So you can talk a little bit about when she loses her daughters, and then she loses her husband, she loses her brother.
And she was forced to leave the brand.
And then she was forced into this leadership position that she didn't want. But the thing is, you can't just list all of these things. You have to list one thing, explain how it connects. Yes.
So if it was like she was the leader of the rank,
Yes. So your topic sentence may be that she became a big leader. So your evidence is that the commandant put her in charge of the barrack. So your reasoning is, why is this evidence, why does it show this topic sentence or this claim to be true?
Cause I felt that she was,
They felt that she had the strength.
yeah, I understand.
That's your reasoning. Is that anywhere in the story?
No.
It's not really. We are going to use what's directly in the story, and we're going to use our reasoning that comes from us. So let me give you guys a non-story specific example of this. So on my outline, on my examples, I talk about the loss of Rick. So I was previously engaged and I lost him. That for me was very emotional. So when she lost her husband, he was going to be my husband. So I connected on a personal level. So if I said she was surrounded by terrible death, my evidence was that she lost her husband. My reasoning could be that I felt connected to her because of my own loss. That's not from the story. That's not specific to the wording. That's my own personal experiences.
Okay.
So it can be your personal experiences that connected you. It can be the way the language is tailored that connects you. But your reasoning is going to be after each piece of evidence. So the CRE is that you make one initial claim, you have evidence that proves that claim, but you have to explain that evidence because not everybody is going to feel the same way. I had on my outline the loss of Rick, and I can guarantee I'm going to get probably at least 2 papers between all my 111 classes that still have loss of Rick on there. And every time I look at that, I go, oh, you lost Rick too? No, it's me, but it's just a copy and paste feature. So you have to make sure you're talking about your own personal connections. So your first response is one initial claim, your evidence, but you have to explain why you believe so. So it's kind of like what we talked about before if we have a murder of some kind. So your initial claim is that Brian killed a man. So what evidence do you have? Well, Brian knew this person. Well, he was around that person that day. Well, they had talked on the phone. That's all kind of loose evidence, and you have to explain each piece of evidence. But if I have his confession, if I have his fingerprints on the murder weapon, I'm still going to connect it, but I don't need as much. But if I have loose pieces of evidence, then I'm going to need a lot of that. So if you said this was a really happy story, you're going to have to provide a lot of evidence that explains that helps readers understand what about the story was happy. So you're going to have to use a lot of reasoning on that. So one claim, which is your topic sentence, as much evidence as it takes, but after each piece of evidence, there has to be reasoning there. Yes.
I guess I'm a little confused with what the difference is between evidence and reasoning. So is the evidence pieces like proof that you pull from the paper, and then the reasoning that's your response?
Yes.
Is that correct? Okay.
It's the reasoning is you connecting this evidence to that original claim.
Okay.
So if I said Brian confessed, that's my evidence. Brian I have his confession on record. So my reasoning would be that he killed this person because of this, this, and this, as explained in his confession. That reasoning is going to be me making that connection to that topic sentence.
But not your own personal thoughts.
The reasoning can be your personal thoughts. Yes. The evidence cannot be. And the summary cannot be. So this idea of CER, not CRE, this is something that we're going to talk about quite a bit, and that's why I gave you guys the handout. I also gave you guys a handout on some reference and citation language, so when we're talking about these things, you guys are not completely confused. So this is on the other side, and it just talks through some of these ideas. So a reference is it's something that's being referred to. So if I say, where is a reference, or where is your reference, I'm looking for what you're referring to. A source that is who or what is being referred to. So Menkel's piece, Menkel is the source. Citation is how we refer to that reference, that source material. Cite, this isn't a website, that's an S. This cite is the action of creating a citation. The pieces that we're going to talk a lot about today in 111 that I want you guys to be very clear on. In-text citations. So in the text, we are going to have in-text citations. So every time that you talk about Menkel, and it's something that you can point to in the story and go, that came from here, that came from here, that came from here. And it's not you explaining it, it's not your own personal feelings. You can point to it in the story and go, here it is. Every time you do that, you are going to have an in-text citation. So every time it comes from the story, in your text, you're going to use an in-text citation.
And that is just the little...
Right now, that's the little 1997, that's after Menkel's name.
Okay.
That's right now the in-text citation. Now the bibliographic entry. That is how, at the very end of the document, that very last page, that has the entry. It's called different things based on the documentation style. So the documentation style is the style that we're going to use. And underneath that, you guys see APA and MLA. Right now, we're using APA. And we're using this for a few different reasons. APA stands for the American Psychological Association. You don't need to know that right now. We're going to learn a little bit more about that later on, but you just need to know we're going to be using APA structure. You're also going to hear quotes. When you quote, you're using the exact wording from the source. You should not use a lot of quotes. You should only use this when it cannot be said any better. So most of the stuff that Irma Sonnenberg-Menkel says, we can twist it around and we can make it into our own words. But remember that exchange between her and Anne Frank where she says, Irma, I am very sick. I'm so sick. And she says, no, you're not. How are you going to rephrase that? That's kind of hard to rephrase. But she says, older people must share their stories. That's not a lot of information, so we can rephrase that. She thinks that people should share their stories. We can rephrase it into something else. When you rephrase it into something else, into your own words, that's when you're paraphrasing. So when you paraphrase, which you're going to do a lot of, you're taking the words that exist and you're changing the wording around. You should use this when the information is significant, and this is what you're going to have throughout your entire summary. Now, when you summarize, you take a large idea and you condense it into something small. So an example of this, we are going to summarize the Holocaust for the introduction. You may summarize Anne Frank's story for the introduction. You're going to hear a lot of these words. You're going to use summaries or a summarize. You're going to summarize a few things in the introduction. You're going to use paraphrasing in your summary, and then your evidence is going to be quotes and maybe some paraphrasing. So I'm going to have you guys focus on the work for English 111. You need to have your thesis and outline open and ready to go, so make sure it's saved but also closed for 111's class.